Here we are. It is match day. What number in the English
Match
Premier League?
day.
Match day 2 in
A
MLS.
lot.
It's match day 1 for the Chicago Fire tonight. A game that the weather looks like it's actually going to be decent. It's approaching 50. One that Maria and I planned to go to until I was reminded that I have a daughter who's having a birthday party today. So,
And she doesn't want to move her
yes.
birthday to Soldier Field.
Oh boy, that's just so revealing, isn't it? So we were going to miss the, well, you and Jeremy could still go, but I think you're looking at the forecast and it's still a little chilly for you guys. So we'll
Yeah,
be
it's-
watching.
Maybe we just wait a couple weeks and
Wait for
it will. The temperatures
Well,
will
they
rise
play
5 degrees.
New York City tonight. We will be following that. And there's a lot of games going on this morning. I only was able to watch the Newcastle game. They lost. They seem like they're losing a little bit of their mojo.
Yeah, they might be.
And do you want to know the score of the Leeds game?
What is it? It's 1-0.
It's 1-0.
Yeah.
Chelsea, apparently in free fall until they've hit the trampoline of Leeds. Look like they might pull this one out.
In the first half, I got to see the first half, and they had like 4 pretty good opportunities, and they all just like missed in the most. Like they all should have gone in, and they all missed.
That's their
And
MO still,
That's their
though.
MO.
I mean, midweek they had the FA Cup game against Fulham, and that was the same deal, wasn't it?
No, not Leeds, Chelsea.
Oh, Chelsea.
Yeah, but
Well,
definitely Leeds.
But I'm sorry. With that description, I just assumed you were talking about
you would
Leeds.
assume, but Chelsea should have been way further ahead in the first half than they are.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, poor
Well,
guys.
maybe they'll tie it. Maybe they'll pull out a point here.
In the
they could
90th
really
minute.
use it.
That's not how Leeds works.
Well, you didn't watch at the end of last year. They did that a lot.
Well, this
Of
isn't
course,
the
they
same
were
thing.
under the management of Jesse Marsh.
Jesse Marsh.
Eagle sound. Anything else? I mean, that I did mention the FA Cup match this week against Fulham and Leeds. That was a situation where Leeds had lots of chances.
Oh,
and
so
did
many
not.
chances. So many chances. And now Bamford's out with an injury after that game.
Could be a blessing, though. He wasn't exactly lighting it up.
No. And you know what else I realized this week? Patrick Bamford looks a lot like Angela Lansbury.
He does not. I do see that. I just think that you've been watching way too much Murder, She Wrote. I will
There's no
I will
such
call
thing.
Jeremy about that. But I do think he looks like someone who time traveled from 1984 and is like, oh, I'm a professional soccer player from the 80s. There's my voice again. That's my
This is your New York.
that's my New York accent, everybody. I saw. So that was disappointing. Non-game related, did you see that campaign this week in England where I think it was like the Wilderness Awareness Week,
Yeah.
where they took all of major football team crests in England and they removed any reference to wildlife or wilderness?
Mm-hmm.
I thought
And
that
it's
was
just-
a very effective and very cool campaign.
Yeah. It's just blank shields now.
Blank shield, sometimes with a little soccer ball.
Uh-huh.
Even the forest one, the
The tree's
the
just
phallic
gone.
tree had been removed.
It's not that phallic.
I don't know. You're right. There's nothing. I don't know why I said that. I don't know why I said that. There's nothing phallic about the forest crest because it's gone now. But I thought that was a.
Or is that more?
I thought it was a really cool way to bring attention to the fact that how we need to protect, the natural world through a way that would reach a large audience. And I thought it was also a fascinating comment on the design of just how many animals that we rely on. And I would suggest if we keep going down this, environmental track, that new rebrand should be all robot related. We won't have this problem. Thoughts? Nothing. Okay.
Let's just have AI generated crests and it's all robots in all the crests.
I'm going to do a few AI generated crests and do a post this week.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Chelsea robot AI.
I will do
generated crest.
Pulisic robot Superman Chelsea crest. That is what I will do. So this week we have a special pod. We are getting ready for our Peru episode. But with the recent Carabao Cup victory and increasingly strong form in the league, we thought we would talk to our fellow friend, Adam Brooks. Adam Brooks is an artist here in Chicagoland, part of the artist group Industry of the Ordinary, and he is a lifelong and very intense Manchester United fan. So we thought we would talk to him about the club, about their recent form, and if he had any thoughts about the club's crest, any devil-related thoughts. So a word of warning, he was born on the East Coast, and if you have trouble with East Coast accents, it may be a bit much.
Yeah, it's pretty thick.
It's pretty thick.
It's a thick New York accent.
It's a big, wide slice of New York pizza coming your way. Okay, so here's our interview with Adam Brooks. Hi, listener. This is Justin here. Just a quick note. We did this interview with Adam before the 7-0 loss United suffered to Liverpool. So we won't be mentioning that game, and I'm sure Adam will never be mentioning that game. Okay, now on to the interview. Good morning, Adam. How are you?
Hi, Maria. How are you? Are you both at the museum?
No, we are in my wife's studio in the garage. So we do this. So we actually started a project where in the next few years we'll be developing traveling exhibitions around the design and culture surrounding football. But in the meantime, just to kind of keep our creative juices flowing, we started a podcast where we talk about the design surrounding football. And don't worry, we have 0 listeners.
That's okay. I would be happy to have 150,000 listeners.
Who would it be?
Because when it comes to football, it's so deeply in my blood that I'm always happy to talk about it anywhere with anyone at any time. And it's a great passport. Pretty much wherever you go in the world, you can find someone to talk to about football. And I'm not sure if there's anything else that is that universal.
It's true. That's often said that is really an entry point to so many cultures and groups. For anyone listening who doesn't know, your background is actually in the arts and you're half of the artist group Industry of the Ordinary. Can you just give a brief description of what you do as an artist?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just pouring out my tea from the pot and giving it a quick stir here.
Wait, Adam, you're drinking tea. Are you British?
I actually am not. As strange as it may sound, I was born in New York, but my parents moved me and my brother to London when I was 18 months old. So to all intents and purposes, I grew up English, which is where my love of football came from. But that and actually, I've only started drinking tea since the pandemic. I never drank tea as a kid or even as a grown up. It was always coffee. But for some reason,
I think your background really lends a lot of credibility to our podcast because no football podcast is complete without a native New Yorker accent.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's that heavy New York accent's giving us a lot of credibility. I appreciate that. So anyway, carry on. Yeah. You're explaining Industry of the Ordinary.
Just as one more quick aside about being a native New Yorker. Sad to say, both Boris Johnson and Donald Trump were also both born in New York. Oh. Although I was born in Manhattan, Trump was born in Queens. Boris was born in Manhattan too, and he had to get rid of his dual citizenship before he could become prime minister, and that was the least of the reasons why he should have been disqualified. But
Yeah.
anyway,
So
that's
that Trump and Queens really dispels a lot of rumors out there that you were part of a kind of diabolical triplet group.
exactly. Yeah, and I know that
That's great. We're here to
I've
dispel
heard that rumor too.
yeah.
Boris, Donald, and Adam.
Okay, so back to Industry of the Ordinary. So we've been my working partner Matt Wilson and I have been working together since 2000 and really since 2003, but we didn't really name ourselves until 2004. So it's 19, 20 years depending on how you look at it. And essentially, he also he is really English. He was born in Reading and grew up there, but came over here to go to grad school. So we started working together almost 20 years ago, and essentially what we do in a nutshell is performative sculpture and everything that broad definition encompasses. We're not constrained at all by media, but our ideas drive the way that the work ends up looking. And so we do performance. We've done a lot of public art. We use photography. We use sound. On a few occasions, we've used painting and drawing when it seems to be appropriate. So it's broad, but what we're really interested in is considering what the ordinary is, the everyday, the quotidian, and how we can actually re-endow that with some sense of meaning and necessity and urgency, because it's been such a pejorative term for so long. And so one of our informal mantras is I want to be ordinary, because so many people would immediately say, why would you ever want to be ordinary?
We'll put a link on the website to see anyone interested to see more of Adam's and Industry of the Ordinary's work. It's really phenomenal. They are a huge presence here in Chicago, and I would say nationally, and not only have shown extensively, but influenced a lot of other great artists in this country. So we will share that. Adam,
let me also just say that the football has been central to our activities. In fact, even before we started working together, we would sometimes run into each other at various bars around Chicago that back in the old days were the only places that you could see a lot of matches. And we actually both were in Sedgwick's in May of 1999 when Man United infamously came back to beat Bayern Munich in the Champions League final in the last couple of minutes of added time. And I didn't know Matt was there, but he always tells a story that he saw me jump up on a table screaming my head off after Solskjaer's goal went in. I don't remember all that much about that day, because there were many pints consumed, but needless to say, that was one of the pinnacles of being a football fan and being a Manchester United supporter.
That brings up an interesting question. Obviously, you are a huge United fan. How did that come about? Because you're not from Manchester, are you? I mean,
No.
you're from New York. We know you're from New York, but when you moved.
Yeah.
I'm from New York, but really, I grew up in London, in West London, and and my closest team actually geographically was QPR, and I did go and see QPR a lot because my best friend, when I was in primary school, was a QPR supporter, and so we would go and see them a lot. And my brother was a Spurs fan, so when I wasn't going to see QPR, I'd go and see Spurs. And this was in the bad old days of the early and mid '70s. But the reason that I became a Man United supporter, and some people listening will say "Glory Hunter," which is the dig. But so I was 8, and United got to the European Cup final. European Cup as it was called back then, not the Champions League, because you actually literally had to have won the league the season before or have won the European Cup. So there were no 4 places. It was a much more exclusive club, but they had a great team back then in the mid to late '60s. With the so-called Holy Trinity of Charlton, Law, and Best, and Georgie Best was, he was my hero because he was an amazing footballer, but also was one of the earliest kind of celebrity footballers because he was, he was countercultural. He grew his hair long. He grew a beard. He was photographed out at nightclubs. He was part of the nascent youth culture that was emerging, particularly in England, but obviously globally at that point in time. And so that attracted me as much as anything, given my particular fondness for individuals and movements that kick against the establishment. And a lot of people would complain that his hair was too long, and so I grew my hair long and was told.
Did it have the same effect? Did you also entrance millions of fans and followers?
Did you also suddenly become really, really good at football?
Sadly, neither of those things happened, but I did get sent home from school a few times to go and get a haircut, or my tie wasn't done up properly. So it was really
you were drawn to the countercultural kind of a radical side of Best, and maybe that's what drew you into United. That's really interesting to me.
Yeah, and so I don't think that it's unreasonable to say that certainly had part of it. Part of the allure, obviously, they were a great team and played great football, but there were lots of other great players back in the late '60s and early '70s playing in England. But it was obviously a very, very different game back then. It was not at all international. There were no black players and very, very few foreign players. And so it was pretty insular, but still was considered to be the home of football, which it still is, but also to be one of the best leagues in the world. Yeah. But also, as I said, very insular and very conservative in many ways. And so this whole idea of Georgie Best being someone who was clearly in, if not opposition, then very different from the short back and sides haircut, the traditional English. I mean, the fact that he was Irish too, and given the back in the '60s, there was still a lot of prejudice against the Irish in England. So that was also part of it too. I think that he felt that he needed to assert himself in multiple ways.
You really wish that, he was so ahead of his time. It's kind of sad to see just how brutal the game was, and also no one was really protecting him.
And it's interesting actually, because my father was a photographer, and he actually photographed Georgie Best for the London Sunday Times magazine, for an article about how difficult it was for a footballer of his caliber to deal with the physical defenses that were in place then, and and the lack
Were
of
VAR rules just like a lot more lenient back then, or what was the deal?
yeah. So I remember when yellow card came in, it was either you were sent off or nothing. There was no sanction. And teams like Leeds, who were great back then, but they also were physical as hell. Norman Hunter, his nickname was Bite Your Legs. Yeah. And they would kick 7 kinds of shit out of attacking players just to stop them getting ahead. I mean, you needed to be really durable to be able to keep at it, particularly as a forward back in the 60s and 70s, because the ref would not give you the kind of protection that that forwards these days are given all the time. And with VAR, obviously everything is vastly different. I was just before we started talking, I was watching the first half of the Bournemouth Arsenal match. Come on, Bournemouth! The interminable stops to check everything now. I think in the end I probably am in favor of VAR, but also there needs to be a different mechanism for it to work more effectively, and not stop the game so frequently,
or disallowing goals based on like the hair on someone's knee. I think it's just really it's not going to draw a lot of fans.
Although I think I think in the end I do think that VAR balances out, and a team that gets a decision against them will get one for them over the course of the season. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think that it needs to be refined. So Maria.
I was going to say, the game has certainly changed a lot in the last decades, and we were just wondering how you feel about the current team and how they're doing and the resurgence and everything.
Yeah, you were accused of maybe jumping on a bandwagon early, but the last decade has not been as smooth as it maybe was.
And I would also like to point out that after the 1968 European Cup victory, there was more than 2 decades of fallow period. United did, against all odds, win the FA Cup against Liverpool in 1976. But apart from that, they didn't win the league for 26 years. And so a lot of people forget that, because a lot of people seem to think that football was invented when the Premier League was formed, and that's clearly not the case. But yeah, it's been frustrating at times. A lot of it has to do with the owners and their incredibly bad management. Although, as an aside, I'll say that while the Glazers are blood-sucking, money-grabbing parasites,
true United fan.
They are not. They are not state sponsors of terrorism like the owners of Newcastle.
Give them a chance, though, Adam. Don't cut them short. You're really
Uh,
limiting their ambition.
the Glazers, I wish they would fuck off, uh, but but here's the rub. If Qatar buys United,
Right.
I am seriously uncertain whether I can continue to support them. I didn't watch any of the World Cup because it's in Qatar. So, um, even as a fanatical United supporter, there are limits to what I'm prepared to put up with. But anyway, to go back to Ten Hag, or actually his name in Dutch is pronounced Ten Hag, but no commentator is going to sound like he's about to expectorate when he refers by the correct
I don't know.
pronunciation.
Dutch is a beautiful language.
You're speaking to two Dutch speakers. So.
Yeah, so that's the correct pronunciation.
It is the language of poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
of really horrible poetry.
No, there's some beautiful
true.
Dutch poetry. It all sounds like it's being spoken underwater, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's like
you're
choking while speaking German. Is how I like to think about it.
If Johan Cruyff is speaking it, of course it's beautiful.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's been astonishing to me how one man can turn things around so completely. I mean, at the beginning of the season, obviously with those two early consecutive defeats, it was like, oh shit, here we go again.
Yeah.
More bollocks. But in this case, clearly he needed time, and he has a plan. He had a plan when he was at Ajax, and actually, of all of the possible mooted next managers after Solskjaer was sacked, he was the one that to me seemed to be the most interesting. Although I was disappointed that Spurs got Conte, I felt like that was an opportunity missed. But in the end, the results have proven that Ten Hag had, he adheres to a version of total football, that Rinus Michels instituted in the 70s, and had Cruyff and co as the players on the pitch to carry it out. And more than anything, it's just been great to watch United get back to a version of the game that they've always been renowned for, which is exciting, flowing, attacking football. The last few managers, just watching the ball go sideways and backwards all the time, under Van Gaal, even though he's Dutch too. I mean, it was, and certainly even
Van Gaal's
worse
army. Yeah.
under Mourinho. I mean, Mourinho was past his sell-by date as a manager by the time he got to United. His defensive positioning setup, it was so boring. And so regardless of what else happens, I mean, obviously it's been fantastic that United got a trophy, have already won a trophy in Ten Hag's first.
Does that qualify?
season.
Does that qualify as a trophy? The Carabao Cup? What's your feeling on that? It only qualifies when United wins it, or what's the deal?
No, I call it the League Cup because it started in the 60s as a secondary cup competition that gave potentially smaller teams the possibility of winning some silverware, which they did. In Swindon Town famously beat Arsenal back in the late 60s in the final. There was a forward called Don Rogers who I think scored 2 goals in that final. And you may have already ascertained, Arsenal are not my favorite team. In fact, years and years ago, when I was just starting as an artist, I made some T-shirts as a side gig, and so one of the T-shirts I made was a picture of an Arsenal player, in the famous red and white sleeves, and it just said "Arsenal are wankers" underneath it.
You could still sell
and
that.
that certainly divide that they are wankers. And much as I respected Wenger, and the battles in in the late 90s and early 2000s, between Wenger and Ferguson and the players too, and the pizza throwing in the tunnel and all of that. I mean, it was great. You like a good competitive spirit, but I probably hate Arsenal more even than I hate Liverpool, just because of the enmity, and in particular, it was that one game where Van Nistelrooy missed a penalty, and Martin Keown came up and did his Monkey Man impression to him at the end of the match.
Well, I think that. Well, what I was going to say is, as a U.S. supporter, I think over here that kind of approach in your joy is equal in your victory as it is in other teams' loss. I think that reality doesn't exist for a lot of U.S. fans, especially new U.S. fans, who follow the league in general. So, like with Arsenal, maybe they like it because Matt Turner is their backup goalie, or they'll follow Leeds for a while because they have, a midfield of All-Americans and a former coach. I think there was an American coach for a few minutes.
Was he?
Yeah, I don't know. I think he was. I'm just kidding. We know all about Jesse Marsch. And with that, a lot of the narratives that are here in the U.S. side on NBC broadcasts or other podcasts are very much following the league. And it's amazing how quickly the narrative of the league can shift. And with United this year, how that narrative picked up where it was last year, where this is a team suffering from a lot of the issues of contemporary football. You have out of touch, distant owners at war with a fan base. You have an overpriced, over the hill superstar who's poisoning the club, and coaches that seem to not be able to be empowered or able to do anything about it, and fans of the team just kind of stuck in the middle. And that was the story that fit into the broader Premier League narrative going on. But like so many things in football, which is why partially I love it, is that things can change so quickly. Mm-hmm. And the narrative around, the narrative around United now, broadly, even outside of the fan base, is so positive because I think it is one of resurgence. I think the way they're playing, not just with more purpose and direction, but you could get a sense that there's a lot of buy-in from the players. And then other storylines, I think the Rashford story is probably one of the best stories of the league this year, to see him not only come back to form, but to be in the best form of his life. And I would say the top English player at the moment by far.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And because I was stuck in England throughout COVID, and so was there for 16 months from the beginning until one was able to travel again. I saw all of that because it was everything that Rashford did to stand up to the Tory government, who wanted to slash school meals. The fact, and of course, my friends who support other teams were, they were skeptical of this, and I do think that Rashford did everything he did off the field because of his deep commitment, having grown up in a single mother, family on welfare, and seeing it all firsthand. That he's a very committed and honest individual, but I think that all of the pressure that was heaped on him, and conservatives in England decried this, and how can a footballer take positions like this? Much as conservatives in this country say, well, how can Hollywood stars take a position on anything? But in the end, I think the effect that it had on him as a footballer has been shaken off, because I think that for me at least was largely what caused his dip in form and his lack of confidence. Also, that Solskjaer did not know how to manage. I mean, Solskjaer wanted to be mates with all the players because he was an ex-United player and a hero of the club, but never should have been appointed permanently. But so these things go. It's easy to look at that in hindsight. But what the team needed was a disciplinarian and someone who would not brook any any resistance from the players. And you saw it when he benched Rashford because he was late for a meeting.
Yeah.
And then he came on and he scored.
Yeah.
And so it could have all gone the other way.
You know what I loved about that incident too, and of course goals wash away a lot of animosity, but after the game, even Rashford, instead of being prickly like a lot of top footballers might be, like saying, I think I probably should have been in there, I could have gotten another one, he was like, yeah, I was late, we worked it out, we're fine now. I that to me was really revealing. Like if it was Ronaldo would have stormed off halfway through the game and like been over at Piers Morgan's house.
Would have stormed off?
Oh no, sorry, I apologize. He would have done that again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean,
boy. And just briefly, because I don't want to spend any time on the past, but he was a great player for United, but it was the worst possible decision for management or the owners, the board, to bring him back. It was a clearly calculated move to sell
marketing,
more T-shirts in other parts of the world.
Yeah.
And it, even though there were some amazing moments, when he scored a hat-trick against Spurs, which was actually the day that I flew back finally after COVID. So I was at Heathrow listening to it on the radio. But that aside, I'm so glad to be shot of him, and I hope he's happy, to be collecting a massive paycheck out in the desert. But,
he's scored like 3 hat tricks in a row, I think, in the last 3 games. I think everyone just kind of stands still and passes, and he hangs out like a yard away from the goal line. And just
yeah, well, that may be the only thing that's porous out in the desert is the defenses.
All right, Mia, you had another question?
Yeah. So, Adam, on this podcast, since Justin and I both love talking and discussing football badges and crests, that's one of the things that we've been doing every week, is just diving into different clubs from around the world. And so we were really curious, as an artist, what is your opinion of the Manchester United badge?
Well, so it's been changed. They took the devil off it a few years ago, and there's been some rumbling about bringing it back. I mean, it's interesting because there's because of Manchester's position as a trade hub in the 19th century, both City and United have a boat on their crests, and not a lot of people necessarily notice that, but the fact
we noticed
that, well, yeah, because clearly you have an entirely different perspective on it.
We're like, uh-oh.
Which I'm not saying pejoratively. I think it's actually really
No,
interesting.
I mean, they both have boats, not.
Yeah.
But I miss having that Red Devil. Just again, it's it's the countercultural thing. Why would I not be drawn to a team that are called the Devils? Because as a confirmed atheist, that and why are there no team that are called, well, having said that,
The Saints.
I immediately like, well, actually, yeah. So,
well, I think
so. I would like to see the Red Devil back on the T-shirt, on the top.
I did hear rumors that Tottenham was thinking about changing to the Jesuses.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
They're just going to switch out the fighting cock on top of the stadium just with a giant crucifix.
Yeah,
I don't know. I have my sources.
That Jesus will not be able to walk on water because, Spurs famous since they won the double in 60-61 have not won the league. So, it's been a long wait. And I kind of feel that pain because my brother is still a Spurs supporter. We banter back and forth. So, by the way, I'm on the Guardian's website, and despite being tuned down, Arsenal have come back to
wow,
poor cherries.
Big shock there.
But even if it remains that way, that's 2 big points potentially lost. Yeah.
Well, Adam, I think that's an interesting point you bring up about the badge. And I do sometimes think that in these clubs search for more merchandise, the constant rebranding, they're at risk of losing some history and a connection with their supporters. And I think it points to some of the issues you've pointed out. And as we've looked at a lot of different crests and badges, the ones we're always drawn to are the ones that retain a little bit of that wonky history, where there's some visual tell of the very amateur origins of some of these clubs, because it hints at the history and kind of stories behind these clubs, which is why I'm so drawn to football. And I think, again, speaking as an American fan, why so many of Americans love the game in Europe is because they feel like they can align with a team and immediately be connected to a history, the length and depth of which there isn't much of in this country, so they feel like they're part of something broader. But we have to go soon. But I just wonder, before we go, if you have any predictions for United for the season. Are you guys going to make it into European competition or stay there?
Yeah, I mean, if I can say anything with any assurance, it's that that a top 4 finish is about as nailed on as one can imagine, particularly since Newcastle lost earlier to City. I mean, I don't think that really is in question, barring some kind of collapse that would be as radical as the resurgence that has taken place. I think the league is a step too far this season, but I think that especially because I watched the second half of the City Newcastle match. Arsenal are going to have to really be on their toes not to be overtaken. So I've actually just put on Peacock on my laptop, and there's 8 minutes to go, and obviously Arsenal are pressing for the winner. But I think it's exciting that there's a proper title race. Absolutely. And I think next year United, barring anything unforeseen, will be right there in the mix. the prospect potentially of a cup final between the two Manchester clubs is mouth-watering. And then, back in Europe, it's certainly, the Thursday night cup is a possibility for United to go further. But I'm just, I'm already more than completely satisfied with the season after after the League Cup win last weekend, and also just the level of play. I mean, the this new defensive to midfield triangle of Varane, Martinez, and Casemiro. It's transformed the club so completely. I read a stat this morning that said when the three of them have been playing, United have not conceded a goal in open play.
Well, there you have it. Adam Brooks guaranteeing a 6th place finish for Manchester United this season. Better luck there. Hey, Adam, thank you so much for taking some time, especially on a match day. Not for United, but I know you follow a lot of teams. So, and good luck tomorrow.
Thank you.
We will speak with you soon.
Excellent.
That was great. Clearly a true fan. I think he could have just talked for hours. I think his point on their badge is really interesting.
From a fan perspective, too.
I think losing the devil was a bad, because it was such a funky drawn devil, too.
Yeah, and I think with these old elements, charges, as they say in heraldry, like charges that are
well done, huzzah.
From their like original crests, older designs that remain. They're so unique, and as with the logofication of everything that get washed away when you have something that's so funky. Like, just because it doesn't feel like a modern brand doesn't mean that it's not brandable.
That's true. Well, next week we will finally get to Peru, our long-awaited destination. We just had a special episode this week. So thanks for joining in. If you want to learn more about the Footy Museum, as we mentioned in our interview with Adam, we are developing traveling exhibitions. So maybe you are someone who programs a space and might want to plan something special as we lead up to the World Cup United States. You can go to thefootymuseum.com. You can reach out to us there or see what we're up to. And if you like this podcast, please subscribe and share it.
Please.
Yeah.
Please.
Please. Okay.
Please share it with your friends.
All right. Bye.